And we're back on Florida Powerboat Club's YouTube channel. Thanks, guys, for joining us again. Stu Jones, your host, along with our producer, Ryan McCoy. And we are hanging out in the Man Cave. That's the Pompano Beach studio. And I have got some great news because we just put together 2 more episodes featuring one of our favorite places in the world to go cruising, and that is the Bahamas. This time heading back to the Northern Bahamas, going to be West End, Grand Bahama Island, continuing on to the Abacos, and final destination, Hopetown. And we have got some fantastic weather ahead, guys. Before we get started, let's thank our sponsors. Our presenting sponsor for the FPC 2023 series of events is Mercury Racing, celebrating 50 years of Wide Open. And by these sponsors, in alphabetical order: Big Thunder Marine, Blackwater Boats, Cigarette Racing Team, Concept Boats, Deep Impact Custom Boats, Fountain Power Boats, Midnight Express Boats, Nortec High Performance Boats, Performance Boat Center, SD Marine Group, Isla Morada, and by Statement Marine. And as always, it all gets started right here at the Bahia Mar Resort in Fort Lauderdale with some coffee, bagels, juice, and some goodies on the dock before we get on the boats. It's about 6:45 a.m. and we are getting ready to shove off. And it's a nice casual cruise from the Bahia Mar Resort down the Intracoastal. And there's the 17th Street Causeway Bridge off in the distance, and that means we're almost at Port Everglades, where we're going to do our takeoff today, heading across the Gulf Stream to West End destination, where we're going to stay for a couple of days. But let's talk about this super cool ride we're on once again with Simon and Dee from CORTEZ COVE over on the west coast of Florida. And we rode with him on a fountain last time, but this time we are joining them on this brand new 43 Mag Bay. And yes, guys, that's a set of Mercury V12 Verados, a total of 1,800 horsepower pushing us across the Gulf Stream today. And always, guys, a very unique mix of offshore performance boats, mostly center consoles, of course, and people from all over the United States joining us for this late summer romp. And yes, the guys are getting ready here at Pompano Air Park. Looks like we're backtracking about 45 minutes when it was still a little bit dark. Joe and Jerry are going to be our FPC photo crew flying on this Florida coast-to-coast helicopter's Robinson R44. It does have the air-actuated floats, which is nice as a little safety measure, but remember, they can only fly offshore about 10 miles, and that means that when we take off from Port Everglades, we're going to stick along the shoreline for the first part of the ride and get some really, really good helicopter time. Just look at the amazing weather. The sun is already out and bright. Remember, now these days in August are long, and the sun is out all day. I think we had sunrise around 6:30 a.m. today. Now that it's about 7:30, it looks like it's midday, but really just an hour of sunlight so far as we now cross over the group coming into Fort Lauderdale downtown. Kind of like what happened on our last Bahamas run, where the helicopter got there early enough to do this flyover through these residential neighborhoods. You got a chance to get down low and get some really nice cockpit close-ups of some of our teams that are getting ready for this fun ride. And there's a nice cockpit shot of this Mag Bay 43, and she is one beautiful ride. Pier 66 Resort there off in the distance. We saw a few shots of it on the last video for the June Bahamas run, as the chopper now joins us, going to be doing this low pass. And just a nice way to get things kicked off today. Look at this amazing weather, though. We couldn't have got any luckier. And we pretty much had something like this back in June, if you guys recall, from our first Bahamas episode, number 1, where we had the light winds and the calm seas that we very, very much look forward to on these summer runs across the Gulf Stream. So today, it's looking like we're going to get another dose of fantastic weather and just a lot of sun as we now head to a destination that we haven't visited for going on, I guess, 4 years now, almost exactly 4 years. Of course, Hurricane Dorian in August of 2019 ravaged most of the northern family of islands from Hopetown all the way through Abaco and all of the barrier islands. So that is something that was a terrible thing at the time. Of course, Florida Powerboat Club and a lot of the South Florida boaters got together to support that cause, to raise funds and send over a lot of construction materials to our friends in the Bahamas to help rebuild. So here we are, fast forward now 4 years, and it's going to be our first time back in that neck of the woods. And I'm not sure that it's going to be perfect everywhere we go. In fact, they're still rebuilding a lot of these properties. Some of them will never return, while others manage to get good funding and get things back on track. So we're going to see a lot of that over these next 2 episodes. For those of you who haven't been to the northern family of islands, of course, this is a little bit farther off the beaten path than we would normally do, like our last event where we went to Bimini and Chub Key and Nassau, which is obviously very developed and capital, of the Bahamas. But now we're going to go to the northern family of islands, where typically very small villages and towns and remote islands, and that's going to make this event a little different than the last run. Now joining Simon Williams and his first mate Dee, of course, the Jones family riding on board. The only one not present is my first mate Jackie. She decided to sit this one out. I've got my boys Tyler and Maxwell riding along with us, and that's going to be our crew for this 43 Mag Bay, which I don't think there's a nicer color for a boat, guys. I mean, look at that surf foam green. I don't know what the factory calls it, but that is, to me, the ideal color for a Florida boat, especially a Florida fishing boat. And this Mag Bay center console, which is manufactured in California, is one of the nicest center consoles I've ever ridden on. And here's Mark and Eileen Fisher. Speaking of nice center consoles, this is also a 43, but it's a Blackwater built right here in Miami. And a lot of familiar faces on board the Blackwater. Megan Smith, our office manager, with her husband Dave riding along, as well as good friends Glenn Schmidt and his first mate Catherine, and the 2 nephews, Brian and Kevin Shanahan, who have joined us on a lot of poker runs over the years. And you can see now that the boats are grouping up nicely. That was by design. We had asked them to stay together as a group for this running segment up Fort Lauderdale Beach. Of course, you can see the beach off in the distance, a lot of very recognizable buildings and a lot of those nice fancy Fort Lauderdale Beach resorts. And as I mentioned earlier, we are taking some time to run up the beach so that we can keep the helicopter near shore, and that really helps us in maximizing our helicopter time, because when we turn and go offshore, that's going to be a short ride for the chopper. So doing everything we can to get close, like we are now with Eric and Ivy Ducro. Not their first rodeo with us for the Bahamas. They joined us a year before in this Nortec 390 Sport, and it's powered by triple Mercury 400Rs. So they've got the good stuff, guys. A perfect combination for this 390 Sport. And we have some other Nortecs running with us today. Of course, Nortec, one of our series sponsors for the year. Another one of our manufacturing sponsors, of course, Midnight Express, built right here in Miami. And this is a first time for the Nelson family joining us with this 43 Open. It's got quad Mercury Racing 450Rs. I think it's a boat maybe we've seen before. They had it purchased just recently, and it was all redone like new, and it is just a beautiful ride. Robert is joined by his wife Angie and their 2 sons, Jake and Mike Nelson. So it's a family affair for this team as they head out on Team Helios. And it's the very first event for the Nelson family, so let's roll out the red carpet and give them a very warm welcome to Florida Powerboat Club. And we've seen a lot of this boat over the years, and especially in the last year or so, because Cliff Anderson seems to have a lot of time on his hands these days. He's been doing a lot of poker runs with the club, and it seems a little unusual that we'd see a 34-foot MTI going all the way to the Bahamas with us, because it's not the biggest boat, of course, and I think we've only had maybe once or twice in the past we've had a 34 MTI join us. But Cliff's pretty adventurous, and he's ready for the run, and it turns out we've got the best conditions ever, so he's going to put on a good show today in this 34 MTI. And there's a nice high-level shot. Looks like our helicopter crew is practicing for that money shot. That's, of course, the shot where all the boats get together and we get a total group all in one frame. But you can see there's still a lot of boats off in the distance. We want to get them all bunched up, and we are going to be doing that very soon. But in the meantime, there's the magic shot, guys. Look at how we've got 4 or 5 teams just running alongside with that nice backdrop of Fort Lauderdale Beach along the shoreline. And we've probably got about another 5 miles, maybe 6 miles to run before we stop the group and rally up for the restart, where we set our heading for West End. And now we're joining Roger and Pam Anderson once again, getting to be a household name around Florida. Powerboat Club, of course, we all saw them on the last event to the Bahamas. They actually won the Bahamas Poker Run back in June. Just the two of them on board today. They've got twin row seating on this boat, a big feature of the Nortec 390. Quad Mercury Racing 450Rs. That's about as much power as you can bolt on. But of course, now the 500s just came out. Roger and Pam have done so many events this year, I have lost track. Well, if you're paying attention, guys, that's 1, 2, and now 3 Nortec 390s attending. This is Hayes and Carlin Wilson in their Nortec 390 that is all decked out in all white with some nice red trim and some matching Mercury Racing 400Rs triple set. We helped find that boat for them from a member in Louisiana. He told me what he wanted. He said, Stu, we're trying to find this Nortec that's just perfect for our boating lifestyle. And they had joined us years earlier on a big Everglades, which they loved, but it just wasn't able to keep up with the rest of the pack. Well, you can see we solved that problem as they're running nicely today along the shoreline. So congratulations to Hayes and Carlin enjoying the Nortec. And I want to point out just how fantastic the graphics on these boats are looking today, like this Concept 4400 Donald and Don Haddon. This concept powered by Quad Mercury Racing 450Rs, and a boat that they are just loving because they can bring all their friends and family on board and go for several days in the Bahamas. They still have the comfort of a big cabin down below with air conditioning and a bathroom. And that comes in handy when you've got 7 or 8 people on board. And riding along with them is their son Brandon along with his wife Kayla. And they had a new baby, so they got the baby riding. And another couple good friends of theirs, Richard and Catherine Mathis. So they've got a full boat today, and it's looking good here on this Concept 4400. You got to love how the sun is just lighting up the graphics. You can see the different colors they've got in their color pattern. I like the purple, and I know that's Don's favorite color. And I remember not too long ago, their first event with the club was a 32 Belzona, and the boat was entirely purple. And it's another new team, so a very special welcome to this fountain from South Carolina. This is Steve and Christy Lee Carter, joined by their friends Mike and Jennifer Hyman. 38-foot fountain lightning, and some really cool similarities here in this event, because I remember that on our last Bahamas Poker Run, there was a brand new team that had never done a run before, and they joined us in a 38 fountain lightning. And here we are now with the Carters doing their first run in a 38 fountain lightning. So team side piece looking good with these graphics all lit up. That's what I love about leaving early in the morning when the sun comes up on the horizon. This is when we get the money shot. And I'm going to give them the official Rooster Tail Award for that cool rooster shooting out the transom. And I do want to thank Fountain Powerboats from North Carolina. They've joined us again as a series sponsor for 2024. And another big wide shot now as we zoom in on the entire group. Everybody's spread out nicely, keeping it safe as they run along the beach here. Now we're getting up past Pompano Beach. I can see the Hillsborough Inlet Lighthouse way back in the distance. So we're going to get up to about Boca Raton, Deerfield Beach area before we stop the group and get ready to set our heading for West End. Going to be a 72-mile crossing from the point where we start. I think we've run about 10 or 12 miles so far. So really at about 84 to 85 miles for the entire run today. Not bad. None of these boats are going to have any problem with that fuel consumption because that's a pretty small range. But with these big outboards, it also depends on how fast they want to run today. Remember, the faster you go, the more fuel you burn. We like to think of these Bahamas runs across the Gulf Stream as just nice casual cruises. The hot rodding thing isn't really ideal for this kind of a setting. Around 55 to 60 miles per hour is the ideal cruising speed for most boats, and we like to keep it around there for the trip across the Gulf Stream. And there's the formation. It's loose and it's casual, but you can see we've got everybody lined out nicely. Of course, we're all talking on the radio. Channel 78 is our preferred channel for those of you who do use your VHF radios. That's about the only time we use them. And, of course, when we check in with the dock masters for our slip assignments. But there's the formation all established. That is Deerfield Beach off in the distance. And let's count them, guys. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 boats departing here with us today. We've got one more joining us. He's a little late getting out of the box, so 10 today going over to West End. Well, I would say that is a 10 out of 10 on the money shot scale, guys. Couldn't get much better than that. And here's what it looked like from inside the cockpit of that Mag Bay 43, looking out over those 3 monster Mercury Verado V12s, 600 horsepower each, which, by the way, I know you're all asking, how fast does she go? This is about an 80-mile-an-hour boat, the 43 Mag Bay, which is, I would say it's about exactly where these engines are geared to run. I don't think any boat with these new Mercury V12s is spec'd out to run much more than 78 to 80 miles per hour. So we're right on target with that speed. And you can't help notice just how perfect these waters are for the crossing, and not a lot of other boats out here. Remember, it's midweek, guys. It's like a Wednesday morning at 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning. So there's really not a lot of people out. It's summer season. Of course, a lot of guys like to come out and fish, so we did see a few fishing boats, but for the most part, we pretty much have this ocean to ourselves today. And Chopper's going to spend some close-up time now with the Nelsons once again in Team Helios. A new 43 Open, or new to them anyway. It's a reconditioned 2016 model, Quad Mercury Racing 450Rs. They've got the radar scanner on, and all the way from Arkansas. So they are really out of their element. If you think about this, if I was one of those boys, one of their 2 sons riding along, I'd be pretty happy right about now. Mom and Dad are taking them out styling on this new Midnight Express 43, and they got 6 days ahead in the Bahamas. And now it looks like we got the Nortex paired up here, and maybe even all 3 of them together, starting off with Hayes and Carlin Wilson in their Nortec 390 Sport. Now, I mentioned earlier they got this boat a couple years ago from a member in Louisiana, but they live in Destin, Florida, so they're still a long ways from home to join us for this Bahamas trip. Of course, Roger and Pam are a long ways from home too. They're from Texas, and in fact, they left their other boat. They had a Nortec 390 Sport prior to this model. They kept it, and they keep it in Texas, but this one stays in Miami. And these are just some beautiful video clips, guys. It's not often that we get a chance to shoot this kind of video. And it is important to note that we asked everybody to be very careful with their headings. When you're running in a group formation like this, it's very easy to get off heading, even by 1 degree. If you get distracted, you're looking at your phone or the stereo or reaching for a drink, that can often distract you enough to get really close to your next door neighbor. And that is something that we need to watch and always be mindful of, to maintain a straight heading at all times and keep a watch with you at the helm always. So you have your buddy with you or your wife, and if you just look away or get distracted for even a split second and start to go off heading, you need to be reminded or nudged immediately to get your boat back on track. Going to close it off here with Cliff Anderson in his 34 MTI. Looks like he is getting those beautiful conditions. They're going to make him the front runner today. He's leading the pack, getting out at a good 75, 80 miles per hour in these calm Gulf Stream conditions, heading for West End and getting ready to enjoy the next 5 or 6 days in paradise. And here we are. It was about a 1-hour ride. It is still the morning and a beautiful day as we arrive at Old Bahama Bay at West End. And Tyler immediately got the drone up flying so we could take a closer look and just see what a magnificent property this is and how beautiful it is here at West End. And just to remind everybody to get your bearings, West End is the western tip of Grand Bahama Island. It's one of the largest islands in the Bahamas, not the largest, but there's really not very many other marinas that are laid out so nicely and so well protected, because you can see the long entrance going in and then, really coming out of the open ocean, and within just a minute or two, you're in a completely protected marina, which doesn't just have a resort there with hotels, but you can see it's also a residential layout. A lot of lots that are yet undeveloped. That, of course, was a big plan about 15 years ago, or maybe 20 years ago, when Robert Ginn from the Ginn-sur-Mer project decided he was going to develop West End, and he had one of those homes right there on the beachfront. There's a huge resort off to the right. You can book that on Airbnb or VRBO. It's I think accommodate 8 or 12 people. But otherwise, the rest of us are going to be staying in the resort, which is back off in the distance there. And it's about a 5-minute walk from the marina, but it's everything is fairly close. And you can see it's not a big resort. You're looking at it right now. That's all you got. You got the marina, a little dock office, a customs and immigration office, a restaurant. Then you've got the front desk. I believe it's about a 70-slip marina. They're all fixed piers, and they're well protected. And the dock service here is excellent. The crew ride around on bicycles and make sure that you always get a lot of help when you want to tie up. And then you just kind of wander off into this little area of resort buildings. They're all detached. Each one of those is 4 units. And a lot of them are over facing the beach, and I think most of us got those units. So you can see it's really just a very casual and quaint little resort. And I think that's what people like about it. I know that whenever we bring people here, they just kind of go, wow, it's really so beautiful, and there's not a lot to do, so you kind of have to entertain each other, or you just have to be able to find that zone where, hey, I'm in the Bahamas now, and things are going to be slow and casual, and I need to downshift to that mode, second gear, and just hang out and chill. And you're not going to be able to go to any nightclubs or casinos or anything like that. What you see, guys, is what you get. So I think that's one of the reasons that the real hardcore boaters, especially a lot of the guys that like fishing and doing long-range cruising, that's why they like it here at West End and Old Bahama Bay, because they could sit here for 3 or 4 days and just kind of go, oh, well, I'm on vacation. There's a great shot of the grounds and the pool. A lot of people hung out there at the pool. They don't maintain the facilities very well here, I've got to admit, and be brutally honest that they seem to be sometimes on a shoestring budget to keep things well maintained. That's unfortunate because it is such a beautiful property, but the value is there. We weren't paying like several $100s a night for a room. The room rates were reasonable, and I think that most of us had nice suites that, my air conditioner went out one night, but they came and fixed it within an hour. So those are the kind of things that you're going to have to deal with these properties. I believe that it was built about 20 years ago, so it is relatively new by Bahamas standard. And the beach below is where most of us hung out, most of the time. Nice, shallow, sandy beach, and, we had it all to ourselves. And that little restaurant bar down in the center on the beach is where most of us hung out and enjoyed having lunch every day. Fresh seafood, locally caught, often, and of course the cracked conch is to die for. It's the best ever. But really, this is what you get, and most of us seem to enjoy it. I, for one, usually like to get out and do some local cruising. So on the day of arrival, our plan was really to sit tight and just enjoy the property for what it is. And the next day was scheduled to be a day trip, which I felt was important to give everyone a chance to go and cruise further down Grand Bahama Island to Port Lucaya and come into Lucayan Village and get a chance to see that. Of course, it was a place that provided abundant cruising to us and to the club for many, many years. But again, it got run down, and particularly through the last hurricane, never really got rebuilt. So sadly, Port Lucaya is not really one of our destinations at this time until they get some big money in there and develop it. Tyler was having some fun with the drone, and it looks like that's us having some lunch right now, but he really took the time to fly this property thoroughly. And I can honestly say that all the years that we visited here, we've never had such good drone coverage of this facility, of this resort. So I think this helps a lot of our viewers really visualize what they can expect if they were ever to come here to Old Bahama Bay at West End. And I do believe that this will continue to be one of our destinations every year as we start to expand our trips heading to the Bahamas. Love this shot as we pull away from our little beachside bar, and Tyler pulls the drone up high and wide, capturing these images of not only the entire resort and the marina, but the entire west end of the island, including a lot of those beautiful homes off in the distance. And we're going to talk a little bit about the development, or the proposed development, of this island, which back at the time was called Gin-sur-Mer. Gin was the name of the developer. Sur-Mer was beside the ocean. And it was a magnificent project that is now sadly abandoned. when they ran out of money, and of course the economy took a downturn and then never really recovered after that. So currently the project is completely abandoned, but they already did millions and millions of dollars worth of development. So you're going to get a chance to see that, and it is really mind-boggling. Back over here now, a dockside, and that is the Customs and Immigration building off to the left corner of your screen. To the right, that is the dockmaster's office where they check you in for your docking and, of course, manage the fuel. So we've got the Haddons in their Concept, and we've got the Nelsons in their Midnight Express getting some services here dockside, which is good because we do have this day trip planned on the following day, which is going to be about a 100-mile day trip to head all the way down to Port Lucaya and travel through the scenic Grand Lucayan waterway and then back around the top side of the island back into West End. Looks like Mark Berman now arriving. You can see his Sunseeker 60, their Predator coming in. He did the cruise from Pompano Beach from his own personal dock, cruising at 40 miles per hour. So for him, it was a 2-hour crossing coming from the Hillsborough Inlet. And for those of you who are going to say, well, that's not a high-performance boat. Well, really it's not, but it is a performance cruiser that can maintain speeds of over 40 miles per hour cruising. So remember that a boat like this can always leave ahead of the pack, and therefore will all arrive around the same time, or he can leave at the same time and just get there a little later. So remember that we are not opposed to having boats like this in the club. We've got a lot of people who have a second boat, maybe a performance boat and even a yacht. So this is quite common. We're seeing more and more of that. But when it comes to cruising with the club in the group setting, we just want everybody to have a boat that cruises at least 50 miles per hour. We call that the sport boat class. And of course, we do have faster classes, including performance and high performance, which are now up over triple-digit speeds. But as I said earlier in the show, we like to maintain speeds in and around 50 miles per hour to 60 for these events cruising to the Bahamas. A nice shot there of the main restaurant, which is where most of us had dinner every evening. Plan on spending at least 2 hours there. Don't be in a hurry, but it's worth the wait because the food there is incredible. So nice job, Tyler, for getting these great drone shots. Looks like this was when a lot of us were clearing customs and were not yet situated on the dock, but gives you an idea of how quiet things are around here this time of year. And I really think that the amount of traffic coming back to West End and the Northern Bahamas hasn't really picked up yet, but I hope that things start to move along soon. Now, clearing customs, you can see everybody getting into their slips now. It was really quite easy to clear here because you just have the one-stop customs and immigration right here in one building. Well, the next morning, I was so curious to find out how things were over at this Gin-Sur-Mer project because I toured this facility a number of times back 15 years earlier when they were developing it. And I was just truly amazed that I was able to find my way in through one of the entrances, which was gated, but the gate was open. And this was the dirt road going into the project, which I want to say is, I don't know how many acres. It's got to be several hundreds of acres, maybe even in the thousands. It's a few miles long on the one side and at least a full mile across on the other. So it's a big piece of property. But now here looking, you can see that a lot of these paved roads are still very much intact. And even though you have a lot of this growth and these trees and grass, if you look closely, you're going to see the services of a city that are there. Though the infrastructure is here, those are power boxes for each of the lots. These are all developed lots. There's underground electric and water services. There's a fire hydrant there. You can see the boxes have all been trashed. So each home or each lot had one of these electric boxes, and they've since been broken into and, of course, raided, taking out the copper wire and all the breakers and things of that nature. But for the most part, the property itself and the excavation of this property and the marina was where all the heavy lifting was. You can see how carefully carved out these waterways are. And anyone who's in construction or knows what goes on in excavation knows this is all coral. So it all has to be blasted and taken out with heavy equipment, and then they crush it, and then they raise the plane here. In other words, all this land, elevation-wise, has come up several feet. In fact, that was their goal here, was to get this elevation up high above sea level so that they were protected from swells, and they were trying to create kind of a utopian society, if I can use that word, but a perfectly designed village that even though their storms would be coming through here quite often, if they're talking about 20 to 25 feet above ocean level, sea level, they're going to be safe from any major swell coming in here to this island. So that was really what their plan was. Some of the structures that are on the island were built around that time. Most of them were built just as kind of sample structures to show people what the building architecture was going to look like. This is the beach along the south side of the property, and I'm standing up on a platform here that I stood on many years ago, and the platform had really come apart. But you can see now, looking across to the west, and that's the whole property completely excavated. The lots are all in place, and you kind of have to ignore all of this overgrowth and weeds and trees and everything, because at one time this was all just fully under construction, with heavy equipment passing over and making sure that all the property was properly filled and leveled. Here's again some of the structures that were built. This was going to be a clubhouse over here on the beach side. It's one of the only two-level buildings on the property. In fact, I only counted about maybe 10 buildings on the property. None of them were ever finished. But this particular building, we were told at the time, was going to be a clubhouse for some of the residents to come to and gather up and have beautiful views of the ocean. And of course, the beach is right there too. So certain portions of the beach are more usable than others. The beach tends to be a little granular, a lot of rock, a lot of coral. Not a really typically sandy beach like we would have in South Florida, and certainly not the kind of beach that we have over at Old Bahama Bay. But nonetheless, the property was really developed extensively, and this is where they spent all their money. And it has a lot to do with, starting with digging out the marina. That's where they got all their fill. So they brought all the fill out in, giant rocks, giant boulders, and then they went through crushers, and then they used all this backfill to build this entire island. And the roadways are perfectly manicured. They look a little beat up, but they're really not. A lot of these paver sections are built where there's intersections or maybe entrance to a clubhouse or to some kind of an official building for the resort. And they actually carved out islands with bridges so that they actually created more waterfront by doing that in their marina. Now, let me remind you that I've been riding my bicycle through this entire island, so I'm a little bit out of breath at this time, but I did stop occasionally to do a live play-by-play. Here it is. Well, that was certainly a good ride, and I have made it back to the midway point in the property. See way over there, that is the inlet. And this is one of these canals that they carved, and one of these nicer bridges with access to the backside of the island. And you can see over here there's another bridge, much smaller, back in the distance. I don't know if that's a footbridge or just a walking trail, but you can see this whole area is carved out as well. So here's the aerial shot on Google Earth to give you some perspective of the magnitude of this property and this development, which is currently abandoned. Of course, at the very end of the island, that's Old Bahama Bay, where we arrived and where we're staying. And you can see the marina there on the tip, and then some of those lots and homes that remain undeveloped. Then you move further into the island. Now you can see that airstrip, and that is a major airstrip that's about 1.2 miles long. I think it's 7,000 plus long, which is, of course, big enough for jets. And charter planes would fly in from the UK and Europe and Canada with 300-400 people on them to stay here at this resort. But here now you can see where all these little roadways and lots are. But here, right smack in the center, is that massive marina, completely carved out with excavators, and you can see the inlet, and the color of the water would indicate that it's deep. It's very deep. And we're going to visit that a little later in the show, because I want to show people just how big this marina is. And then all of these grounds here between the ocean side and the basin is where this land is being developed. And of course, now on the opposite side, which would be like the northeast side of the island, that's West End. That's the village. And that's where all the local Bahamian and villagers live along that strip of road. Well, guys, I hope that was educational. To me, it's just incredible to see something like this that still has such great potential. I hope somebody comes together with the money it takes to further develop this island. To be great for the Bahamians and, great for us as boaters to have another place to visit. Meanwhile, guys, I'm worn out. My chain fell off 29 times on this ride, but I needed the exercise, and I think it was a good way for me to spend the first couple of hours of my morning before we head out on the waterways. And now, fast forward just about 2 hours, we got the group out ready for our fun run to Port Lucaya today. And the first stopover was to come into this basin at the Ginsermere project and show everybody just the magnitude of this marina and this huge lake that is man-made, essentially, carved out of the coral. Magnificent depths. I mean, you're talking about mega yacht facility here. This is 18 to 20 feet deep throughout the basin. So no restrictions on the size of vessels that they plan to bring in here. And there's a nice wide shot. You can see, this is the basin. This is what the marina and the inner waterways, protected waterways, would be for that development. Now, this drone shot will really give you an idea of that potential, because if you can now imagine buildings, clubhouses and hotels and private residences lining these shorelines and marinas, like big marinas with, hundreds of slips, all protected right off the ocean. That's really what the potential here of this magnificent property is. And to me, it's just mind-boggling that it's sat in this abandoned state for the last 15 or more years. Now, I have done a lot of research on this by going online, and there have been a number of development companies that have come in and tried to buy up this land so they can continue developing it. And there's, some Canadian banks involved. I think they have the largest lien on the property. But the biggest problem has been that the Bahamian government in Nassau has shot down a lot of these potential deals, even at the 11th hour, when the developers had pretty much done their due diligence and put a lot of money up to do their planning. So it's kind of, difficult to understand what goes on in the politics here in the Bahamian government. And I must say that I know that they're always looking out for the interests of their native Bahamians and, their local and their home people. But at the same time, it's the kind of attitude that will discourage international developers from bringing the big money in and developing a project like this that really, it's going to take, not millions, but billions of dollars to do this right. And it's just, I'm sure that it's destined to happen one time soon, but there's a lot of controversy surrounding this project, which has been back and forth in the news over the last 15 years or so. So pretty neat to learn more about it. And continuing our ride along the southern shoreline of Grand Bahama Island in an eastbound direction as we now arrive upon Freeport Harbor. And right here off the entrance of the Freeport Harbor and the port is an area where they have established these offloading pump houses. Of course, this is where all the fuel comes in to operate the island. And it comes in and it is pumped underground, under the ocean, back into these giant holding tanks in the port, and that's how they get all their fuel for their energy supply for the entire island. Arriving now in what we call Bell Channel, this is the entrance to Port Lucaya, and it is approximately 7 or 8 miles further east of Freeport Harbor, where all the ships come in, and the cruise ships and the tankers and the freighters. But this is primarily residential and, of course, for tourism. This marina serves the Lucayan Marina Village and Lucayan Marketplace. And you can see off in the distance some of those big towers are, those are condominium towers in the same harbor. But this is where most of the residential area is of Port Lucaya, and once a very attractive boating destination. Not so attractive now because it is closed, for one. The marina is in a complete state of disrepair, and it was, I would say, pretty much wiped out during Dorian 4 years earlier. But even prior to that, they were really lacking in the funding, and it seemed to me that Port Lucaya as a whole, not just here the marina, but even the resort, like our Lucaya resort in the distance there, you can see it off in the distance, these were once thriving resort properties that just fell into somewhat state of abandonment, not just because of the storm, but I think for management reasons and ownership reasons. And the money just wasn't coming in at the rate that they felt like they needed to maintain these properties. So sadly, they closed. In fact, the Lucaya Resort, I believe, was closed. The big one in the middle there was closed even before Dorian hit here in 2019. And the same is true for the original Port Lucaya Marina and the hotel, which was right there in that central area, that round oval-looking island with the finger piers coming off of it. Was a very popular, low-priced resort where a lot of cruise ship people came in, and even boaters. So you could actually have your boat on one of those finger piers and have your condo or your apartment right in front of that slip, which was quite nice. Looking now further eastbound, and you can see some other developments around here in Port Lucaya and the neighboring area. A few condominium complexes, and otherwise mostly residential. And there are some areas that are nicer with some beautiful homes. But for the most part, these are your Port Lucaya natives here in the Bahamas that mostly are employed and work here locally, primarily in tourism, because that is their main industry here on the island. And now here, a closer look at the marina. And what you really can't see in this shot here from the drone is that this marina is closed. Obviously, there's no boats here, but you can't see really the state of disrepair that these docks are in. And I promise you when I say that they're in really bad shape. We were able to find this one set of piers over on the far corner that were, somewhat beat up, but they were safe enough to tie up to. So we grabbed 2 finger piers and managed to fit the 7 or 8 boats that we had, and rafting up, we were able to get safely into the Port Lucaya marketplace, which is still open for the most part. Not all the shops are open, but there was a time back in the early 90s when we started coming here when this really was a vibrant port of call for cruise ships and for recreational boaters from the mainland that would come over and spend several days here. And the Port Lucaya marketplace was rocking, all day and all night. Plenty of restaurants and little bars and saloons and shopping, and really, hundreds or even thousands of people bustling through this marketplace at any given time. Of course, especially in the summer months when it was easier for the recreational boaters to cross over. And like I said, the cruise ships, a lot of them would come in here and they would berth or tie up a couple of miles offshore, and these big tender boats would bring large groups of cruisers into the Port Lucaya marketplace for the day, and sometimes leave you if you wanted to stay overnight. So that was really a very vibrant time back in the early and mid-90s for Port Lucaya. I could have sworn Mark Berman said he was going to come. Oh, there he is. He made it. Okay. Well, there you go. That's what happens when you cruise at 35 to 40. You're going to make it eventually. But so as Mark arrives for lunch, and a lot of us are midway or halfway through lunch, let's take one more fly up and over the resort grounds, and I'll show you what has happened here in recent years, because to me it's astonishing. This was such a desirable destination for us, for the Florida Powerboat Club. We knew all of the dock staff, and we knew all of the restaurants that were here. We had our favorites, and thankfully there's at least a half a dozen restaurants still open now in the marketplace. So we did find a couple of good spots to have lunch here. And so let's get Mark settled in here to a slip and get back up over the island. Now you see, so there are essentially 3 properties here. The one far left is still open. The one here in the middle is the original Lucaya that was built 20 years ago or so, 25 years ago. And it had a good run for about 2 decades, but has since been closed. And then this property, it's all part of the same complex, was the original Radisson Port Lucaya, and it was taken over, and it was part of Lucaya as well. So sad to see that those properties are not really operational at this time. Back here in the Port Lucaya marketplace, and the last little spot that we hung out right there was Rum Runners, which is a fun little saloon where the only place you can get a drink in an actual coconut. They'll hack off the top of the coconut and give you a rum runner. And we have hung out there for years. In fact, I shot an episode of Powerboating in Paradise TV there in the summer of 1996. And this is the courtyard where everyone would come from town and hang out here every evening. It was packed with hundreds of people. They always had live entertainment. Everybody was dancing, having fun. This place was rocking. Well, we have had a wonderful lunch here at Port Lucaya. A really cool blast from the past, from all the earlier years, 30 years ago when we started cruising here back in the early 90s. So we've all had a chance to see it and maybe imagine what it might have been like back in those days. But it looks like we're heading out, guys, and the cruise is not over. Our excursion today is going to continue eastbound and pass through the Lucayan waterway, a very scenic man-made waterway that opens up on the north side of Grand Bahama Island. But we have gone way over time on this episode, so the good news is that we'll be right back with episode 2 and continued coverage of this Bahamas Blast summer of 2023, guys, and it is going to be every bit as exciting and informative for those of you who love to hear a little bit about the history of cruising in the Bahamas. So we'll see you next time, guys. Make sure you subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell so you'll get an update every time a new episode is released. Be sure to check out the website at flpowerboat.com for all of the details about upcoming poker run events as well as membership information. You can follow us on Facebook at Florida Powerboat Club, and you can follow us on Twitter and on these Instagram pages. Thanks to all of our viewers for your wonderful comments on our page, and you guys know who you are, and I really do appreciate that. But if you have questions or comments you want to direct to me specifically, please use my personal email at stu@flpowerboat.com. I check that daily, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. We're going to sign off for now. This is Stu Jones along with our producer Ryan McCoy in the Pompano Beach studio. Have fun out there, guys. Be safe on the waterways. Wear your life jackets when the time is right, and always respect your fellow boaters. Bye for now.